All right. Well, good morning, Greg.
Good morning,
For
sir.
this week's episode, we're going to talk about something we talk about a lot, but we haven't really used the term cognitive dissonance much. But when we talk everything that has to do with it, but we're going to get in. I'm going to define a little bit and give some examples and talk about perception and how it changes things. There was a whole bunch of different issues we're going to jump in, all surrounding this theme so that we talk about sense making and problem solving. Well, we got to understand sort of capabilities and limitations of how that works, literally at a physiological level with our eye and brain sometimes, and then what that means, of how we approach different subjects. So the idea of, real quick, kind of give a quick definition of some of the stuff. Cognitive dissonance is basically just when any of your beliefs or assumptions are sort of contradicted by some new information. So it could be your beliefs, your assumptions, your values suddenly get sort of contradicted by something else that you learn. And then that creates some physiological and psychological arousal. You kind of have a little unease, a little tension. Go, well, wait a minute. So what you'll do to sort of kind of get rid of that feeling is you might reject some of that information, you might explain it away or avoid that information, or kind of persuade sort of yourself that hey, there really is no conflict, we can reconcile those differences. And so you see that a lot with different ideological beliefs, Greg, right? So like your political beliefs, your religious, your social, whatever those are, we can become very entrenched in these beliefs. And then when we get something that kind of contradicts it, we want to explain that away. Go, well, that doesn't really fit in here, right? We have to
Right.
justify it. And so there's different reasons too that this cognitive dissonance will happen. And there's some big ones, and I'll hit kind of the textbook sort of, I already forget the guy's name who kind of pioneered some of this research back in the 50s. But they talk about anytime you have new information coming in is one, obviously, all right, that contradicts your beliefs. When you have some sort of what's called like forced compliance, where you have to comply in a situation, for what it could be, for work or for school, some social situation. You have to wear a uniform, you have to do this, you have to wear a mask, right? You have forced compliance. That will create cognitive dissonance. And then, of course, what we talk about a lot is anything having to do with any decision, whether that's a small decision or a large decision. When we're faced with similar choices, we get that little turbidity, we get that dissonance going like, well, wait a minute here. These are kind of similar. Which one should I do? This is getting uncomfortable. So it creates that tension. And then some of the biggest influences to this are what can create it is, one, how attached you are psychologically or emotionally to this belief or to this decision, right? Because the more attached you are to a belief, the more you don't like that dissonance, right? And you don't want to deal with it. It's easy to reject new and incoming information because you're very set in your ways and your beliefs. That's normal. And then the other thing that influences sort of like, I guess you'd say, the amount or number of those dissonant beliefs, right? So the more clashing you have with that is the greater that strength of that dissonance is going to be, right? So it starts to impact it. So that's sort of the general definition of what we're talking about. And you can add to that. I'll throw it to you in a second here, Greg. But because of that so heavily influences our perception, our perspective, how we make decisions, how we rationalize things, and it just our behavior in general. So I kind of wanted to get those definitions kind of upfront, Greg. I'm going to pass it to you, and then you can add to that or immediately jump in if you'd like.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And so the problem with dealing with a yellow pad is when we start this early in the morning and I don't get a new sheet. So now I've got arrows going everywhere. So
Oh
I
no,
have
I
to
do.
reconstruct.
So this is the only fun I don't do. So in order to stay organized, Greg, so in
Yeah.
order to listen, so I've got my yellow pad over here with normal note stuff, but I have to do a different white pad for the
Okay.
podcast because anything when we're on the podcast goes on the white pad.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
so
yeah,
what you just did is you just did your opening, and folks, we're unscripted, and
yeah.
and things are in progress. So as Brian is talking, I'm going, that's a good point. That's a good point. So here, let me go back and try to dig through the good points of the stuff that you made. So I want to remind everybody that cognitive dissonance can be just a feeling in your mind when something is different. Don't think that cognitive dissonance has to be a set of empirical data that's lined up that
It doesn't have to
assaults
be
you.
specifically codified or defined. It's that
So,
feeling.
for example, Gestalt phenomenon.
Okay.
You know that we use sometimes in class the Dellenbach cow
Reification. Yeah.
to show how perspective can be pulled, focus can be pulled. So if you look at something and it's confusing to your brain, that momentary turmoil or turbidity inside of your brain is dissonance. It's a cognitive dissonance. Your brain is trying to account for it, and it doesn't have a very clean account. So therefore, it starts creating things.
So specifically to that Gestalt theory, and reification is a big one, where that's the Dallenbach cow, if anyone's familiar with that. But you where you will establish a pattern, and where it's a bunch of black and white, on a paper, you will eventually see a cow standing there in a field when really it's not, but your brain has to make order out of chaos. So there's too much dissonance there. So it says, we don't like this, start connecting the dots.
Too much order, or too much chaos will bring on cognitive dissonance. Does that make sense?
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
You get what I'm trying to say? Both sides of that coin will hit on. So this is what I wrote down too. Even memories will bring that up. I wrote down sense make. You used the term sense make. Folks, look, we're very old and very Greek. When we go back to the beginnings of Arcadia, the underpinnings, let's go back all the way to Aristotle. Aristotle, my own notes here, Aristotle was in about empiricism. Why? Because he thought sense memories were the most important ways to compare things in your environment. So we get our sense make from the very oldest and very Greek. And when Aristotle was around, they brought up the theory of tabula rasa. What does that mean? That means you got to come from a clean slate. So in other words, when we talk in class about, imagine a semi-truck wrapped in Tyvek, so it's completely white, and there's your palette. Now start painting in what you see. We mean to sense make it, to use your senses, your individual senses. Now, I can have other people on the OP, on the observation post, Brian, with brushes and palettes and paint to help me paint in, right? But they're going to have to stand by and be the dozen for their addition, because I can't see the world through your eyes. Do you see what I'm saying? So tabula rasa means that I have to go back literally to the clean slate, to the white. And I like to use the quote, not that I'm a fan of Ben and Jerry's politics, but I'm a fan of their fat grams. And when they were asking about them, how long they tried to get in the market and how hard their research was, and they say, what's the most important flavor? And they always go back to vanilla. Why do they go back to vanilla? Because it's tabula rasa. If you can build a good vanilla, then anything you add to that vanilla is going to be concrete. It's going to be wonderful. So what you're talking about, and I love the uniformity thing, because listen, the greatest cultures on the face of the planet, tabula rasa, their decision making. For example, prayer mats. Okay, prayer mats can't be individual and beaded and have all this wonderful stuff on them. Why? Because you're there to pray. You get what I'm saying? You're there for your relationship with Allah. You're not there for all this other stuff. Same thing, living a life of piety, living a life where you don't have a lot of stuff. And we look at nuns or Benedictine orders or whatever.
Different priests.
Why? They're pushing that stuff out of the way because they're saying there's something more important. The rule of law, the rule of religion, our giving these things up helps me see these things. But Brian, isn't that exactly what we teach the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines on the OP? Listen, take all of this other stuff and create a baseline. Why do we create a baseline, Brian? Because the baseline's the vanilla. Yes. The baseline is what's normal for an area without turbidity when the dust settles. So therefore, an anomaly will stick. It'll rise above or it'll fall below. You get where I'm going with that? So the idea is that we don't want to under or over categorize an observation, because different perceptions can make me choose something that's nothing.
So
you see?
So in order to have that, here's the issue, and here's why I think we're talking about cognitive dissonance, is getting that baseline, getting that pure vanilla. That's the most important part. That's the most important thing for all comparisons. But that's where cognitive dissonance comes in, right? Meaning my own beliefs and thoughts and attitudes and everything I've learned in my life influences how I see that baseline. It influences what vanilla tastes like to me. Because Greg, you know, a really, really creamy, rich vanilla is different than like a French vanilla bean, right? But they're both vanilla though, right? But they have their differences. And I like that analogy because one, it's ice cream. We're gonna have to eat after the
yeah, exactly. And just for people, fact-based data, the difference between vanilla ice cream and French vanilla,
data or
fat-based,
okay,
fat both. Yeah, that's hilarious. But the difference is French vanilla has an egg in it. So listen, to account for that. And the eggshell is white, Brian. We can drop the mic.
There you go.
But we can account for that by saying this. Look, cognitive biases do not help your case. So I go back to the law. The law has been around forever. Okay, when Jesus was walking the face of the planet, when Muhammad was
Hammurabi's code was
okay, there was law.
There was law.
And you know why we have law? Because law levels the playing field. If you're playing on a pool table and the pool table is off, the balls are going to go to one direction and give somebody an advantage.
You're saying law, but I mean, really, you're meaning rules because it could be a game, it could be
law, science, math.
There has to be something codified from which we base everything off of, and the more pure that is, the better your law is going to be, and the better your observation, and the better your comparison is going to be. And there has deep historical roots. I mean, throughout mankind.
So people say, you're exactly right. And people say, hey, listen, you know, the law was written by old white people and this and that. Look, we've updated the law. We've updated the law every chance that we've gotten, just like we've updated the rule of math and science. Why, folks? Because math gets really screwy when you go way out away from gravity and the solar system. Science, Brian, science and specifically physics bends a little bit when it gets way out there. But you know what? It's so consistent right now. It's more consistent than anything else that we have. We can use Mohs scale of hardness to determine, different rocks and ores. We can use the periodic table of elements. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking we have to have something that's codified for comparison. And that's why, like for example, the whole start, I think, of this podcast was a debate, an argument that I brought up because somebody said, well, why can't I wear this in class? Why is it distracting to other people? Does it make it harder for me to learn? And the answer is yes, and no. No, you can't wear whatever you want, okay? Because when you do that, you're distracting yourself from the main mission. The second part and the third part is you do not have the right to go off script when it's going to impact my gameplay. You see what I'm trying to say? And that's all. It's simple argument.
No, and that's kind of what we're getting into now. And the idea is because of things like that, you know, this is where heuristics and stereotypes and things come into play. So if we can't agree on a set of rules, if we can't agree on some decorum, right, whatever it is that we've decided here, that is going to be how we operate in this environment. If you go off script from that, your own message is going to get it's going to get missed, right? And the idea is this, you know, you go back to, you know, we always give the example of people always talk about, you know, people used to always wear suits back in the day, and it's like, well, they kind of still do. I know we you know, anything we've ever done for business, I've always had to wear maybe not a tie, but a sport coat and dress pants and a button-down shirt. And what someone will say is they'll come in and go, yeah, but like Greg has a orange shirt on and Brian has a white shirt on and that guy has a black shirt on and that guy over there has a gray blazer and yours is navy blue. And I go, yeah, but to your brain, it's the exact same thing. So it's cognitively close enough that we're all wearing this we're wearing this suit, right? Because of the context, we all decided to dress up and look professional so that, you know, because it's different than having you and I having a conversation on this podcast.
Yep.
Now, the reason too, what often gets forget about that is you know, I can individualize it, right? Like I'll do like the little, like maybe someone will have like a fancy little pocket square in theirs or a nice watch or like, you know, one of those little gold things that go around your tie or something like that. And that's to show your little individualism and show your style, but you're still complying to the social norms for that situation. And part of the reason that's done is so that we can focus on the matter at hand, right? So now I'm focusing on what you're saying, Greg, not what you're wearing, not your hairstyle, not this. Now, there's this, always a, well, what about individual expression and what about this? Yeah, I'm trust me, I'm all for it. I'm sure I'll share some stories on here of the way I used to act and dress in the Marine Corps, which often got me in trouble because I didn't like those norms, right? But the idea is there's a purpose and a reason behind it. So if I have a little bit of cognitive dissonance there and you're coming at me with some beliefs that I don't really necessarily agree with, or I'm not sure about, Gregor, you're challenging my assumptions. I'm fucking lazy, just like every human being on the face of the earth. So one, I want to stick to what I know. All right, I'm going to cling to those beliefs I've had my whole life because I know them to be true. It's like, I know that every day, whether I've seen it or not, Greg, every single day of my life, the sun has come up and the sun has set. So that's something that I will cling to as the most important or the most consistent thing, right? So think about that from a thought structure as well. Now, if you're challenging me, Greg, and now I don't know how to really respond back and I'm not processing it, I will fall back. I will get lazy and I'll go, well, look at you and your stupid fucking t-shirt and your hair is a mess and you didn't take the time to clean up and you're probably, so what I'll start doing is this creep from what you're saying to what you're wearing, and then I'll just throw that into whatever stereotype because maybe your Slayer t-shirt is a heuristic for me, and I don't like that because I got beat up by someone wearing a Slayer t-shirt when I was 14 years old. Right. The idea is now I throw you into this category where I now don't even listen to what you say. So I'm not even actually taking in the information. But I'm now I have this cognitive dissonance, which causes me to make unreasonable assumptions about you, and then that throws everything off course. But why?
Okay, so much out there. So let's go back to science for a second, and not that you weren't in science, but let's go back to laser focused science for a second. Number one rule for you folks out there to understand cognition biases is that we fear what we don't understand. And fear is a chemical reaction. And fear, the chemical reaction in our brain, changes how we perceive others. Now, if you want to talk about unconscious biases, this is where they start. So let's talk about bringing one out into the sunlight. So Brian and I frequently travel to Saudi Arabia and deal with Saudi Arabia on a weekly basis. Okay. One of the things in Saudi Arabia is everybody dresses exactly alike. Why? So they can stay on mission, so nobody's above or below or next to anybody else. That's their way of taking a look at it. And I'm oversimplifying it, folks.
Right.
But understand this. If they want to have specific identity points, they don't have it in their uniform, their clothing, they don't have it in their prayer mat, and they can do whatever they want when they're at home. But the idea is in public, you level the playing field. So the one thing that they do differently, Brian, you talked about a pocket square in the United States or in France, for example, if you're very, ritzy dressed kind of person, ritzy. I use that word, I'm so old. But in KSA, what they would do is a pen. You would distinguish yourself or set yourself apart by the pen that was in your pocket. Why? Because it's meaningless to anybody else, but an internal, a down and in thing. You look and you go, God, that guy's got a really nice cross pen. You see what I'm trying to say? So you did the same thing. You said we're all wearing the same thing. Look, I like to stimulate the endorphins in your brain and emote a response by wearing bright colors. It does two things. It does something for me. It gives me a dopamine rush when I put on the clothing, and it does something for me when I walk into a room. It displaces the baseline and says, the boys are back in town. I'm here. Okay, Brian, I do that as a choice. Do you see what I'm trying to say? I do that to change my environment willingly and knowingly. So I want you to think of stuff like Hoyle. There's rules and cards that you can't violate or you lose, okay? Especially at a place like Vegas, but also, when you're playing like a euchre tournament, but there's also things known as house rules. Everybody right now knows a house rule. Hey, take your shoes off before you go in. House rule. Or hey, listen, every time you pass by this thing, you kiss your hand and touch the plane before you go. That's a house rule. Okay. The second thing is I want you to think about third, actually, hockey and baseball. I've played baseball on a sand lot in Detroit. We used to, where the house was torn down and it was just a construction area. Played hockey on the street. Car, game on. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. Brian, what was different from those games than an NHL game on the ice? Well, there was differences because of the distance from the blue line, how big the goal crease is. Why do we do that? We do that because it gives everybody the same advantage. That's what the law does. That's what rules do, and that's what vanilla does. So whenever I hear somebody try to pipe up, like for example, we hear this all the time, folks, and I don't watch television. I watch some movies, not the same type you probably watch, and I certainly don't watch mainstream news, right? I seek out the articles that I need to take a look at, and I balance my opinions based on those articles. And I certainly don't use a cognition bias and only go to one source, right? And then when I do it, I do my research on it. Why do I want to do that? Because I want to make sure that when I go in, I have a knowledge of the topic, even if I'm not knowledgeable on that topic. Why? Because somebody pipes up and goes, well, that's not fair, this and that. Yeah, well, it's been a law for 217 years, and this is why that law was instituted. Brian, if you don't know, what you tend to do is you tend to challenge all assumptions. I'm not saying don't challenge.
Right.
I'm saying don't challenge all of them. Just like you said, the sun comes up. We stipulate that. In the law, if I was in a court, I wouldn't have to say, Your Honor, it's May 14th and it's 2:30 in the afternoon. We know that because of the Gregorian calendar.
Yeah.
Those things, Brian, that everybody agrees to, we stipulate to, and it allows progress in society.
No, and this is kind of what we're getting into, because you know, what you just said, you hit a good point right there where you said, you know, about questioning the assumptions. The question is, but where are you coming from in this?
Yep.
So if you're giving a talk on something, Greg, and you've been studying or doing that for a very long time, I'm not on an equal playing field with you if I'm in the audience, right? So if you're the one with the microphone and I'm the one in the audience, we're not on an equal playing field.
Now, I absolutely agree with that. That's a great assessment.
I can ask you questions and I can challenge those things, but I'm not coming from the same place. So I have to remember that, meaning I'm going, okay, well, could you explain what you mean further? Because I thought this meant that. That's very different than saying, well, you can't say that, or that's not true. I just saw one too on LinkedIn that I got tagged in on a post where someone says, yeah, this whole, 93% of, communication is nonverbal. I think that's a bunch of junk. I think it's like, okay, well, that number might not be accurate, but
it's close. It's gosh damn close.
Yes, it is.
On research.
But that's the thing is, so that person took the research and that someone else did.
Yes.
And not just one person, like a lot of people over decades, and went
over decades.
You know what? I don't agree with that. Here's what I think's important.
So therefore, we're on equal par. That's the finish of your sentence, Brian. You understand that if I'm sniping with you and I disagree with your point of view, even if I haven't researched it, that means we're on a level playing field. That's not true. That is not true.
And it was my response to the person who tagged me, and I literally just said, because his second paragraph was actually great, because it said, you should try to, the words, what you're saying should match up with what you're acting on in your body, which is, absolutely. You want congruence. So I said, well, I agree with the second paragraph, because congruence is very important in communication, but pretty much everything we know about human communication counters what this person said in their first paragraph. So yes, you get to say whatever you want, but I think we do this now because of social media too, is we just come across as, well, I don't agree with that. It's like, well, I don't agree, Greg.
But go sit back in your corner.
Well, it's the
play with yourself.
The flat Earth. It's like, what do you?
Well, it's even worse than that sometimes.
You know what I'm saying? It's like well, I don't think that's how it is. It's like, well, that's
great.
No one cares.
Let me address that specific point. How many times do we know from fact-based data and evidence and artifacts? There's a new term now, and I don't remember it, where it's evidence-based policing or something. Listen, that's always been done. Shut up. Don't start a new thing. Don't create a new word and a new file and then find out that it's been around forever, okay? But listen, Brian, in these instances where I hear this, my daughter could never have killed her own baby. My father could not have killed his entire family.
That's cognitive
there is
dissonance.
a setup. Okay, so what that is, Brian, is the electrochemical neurotransmitters in your brain telling you, I have to cope with this for a longer time than you do, because this is a much closer issue.
Yes.
So therefore, I'm going to stem the emotional tide by saying it's impossible, and there has to be another person. There has to be a Sasquatch or a UFO, Brian. There has to be a bearded ninja that snuck in and killed them. The cops are in on it. So those are common responses. But people turn those common responses into a conspiracy theory. How do they say that? Well, I've heard other people say the same thing about their
well, it must be true.
So it must be true. Okay, so just the weight of evidence can make that pool table lean to the left and give you an advantage. So what we do is we say artifacts and evidence, and then, Brian, guess what? There's rules of evidence. For example, we don't take hearsay. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Well, I heard that Jim said that Tom was in the
right.
Okay, and that's not evidence.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And a witness has to be a no shit eyeball witness. He had to feel it, touch it, see it, smell it, and the person's got to have an intellectual acumen where their opinion matters.
Well, okay, that good point on a number of levels, and as we always say, even if you're an eyeball witness something, it's horrible, right? But here you bring up a good point to where, let's say, okay, we're in court right now, Greg, and you're testifying on the stand as a subject matter expert in human behavior, and you've been admitted and by the court as you've been declared a subject matter expert in this. Now, it doesn't matter who calls you, prosecution or defense, you can call in another expert, right, to argue. But if I'm cross-examining you after you say you're testifying for the prosecution, they ask you a bunch of questions, you lay out exactly what it is. I'm the defense attorney. I can come in and say, I can object to what you're saying in the line of questioning, not on your expertise. I can't object to that. I can object to how is this relevant to this specific case. So I can sit there and say, yeah, that's great. That might be everything coming out of your mouth is true, but here's why that doesn't pertain to this. Now that's codified in a court of law. There's rules and procedures on what you can and cannot do. It's very different than just public discourse. It's very different than an open discussion where I can say, well, no, I don't agree with that. And you're going, well, but this is inherently true, or this is subjectively true, which is, you could get into a whole, discussion on the meaning of what that is. But the idea about questioning that is, I can say, that's great. How does this pertain to situation A or B? But I have to take you on the merits of what you say. You get what I'm saying? So that's very different than what we see in a place that has no rules or it's an open forum.
Here again, you just illustrated the essence of what we're talking about. So a police officer, his testimony is taken no more than the testimony of anybody else in that courtroom.
Right.
That's huge, because that says we don't have our thumb on the scale just because I'm carrying a badge. Because even the law understands that there's good and bad 7-Eleven clerks. There's good and bad librarians. There's good and bad cops. Okay? Subject matter expert. A subject matter expert, it's not like voir dire, Brian, where we're picking a juror. You bring in a subject matter expert, everything that person's done and where he's gone and everything else is brought before the court. And you don't have to stipulate to him. If you're a prosecution SME, the defense can tear you apart on the stand, and then the judge has to be the arbiter of fact and go, yeah, okay, we'll swear him in as a subject matter expert. And guess what, Brian? For every court, guess what we have? We have an appellate court where we can appeal the decision all the way up to what? The Supreme Court of the United States. Our legal system has a series of checks and balances to make sure that the law was equally applied in your case. But we still get people that say, listen, the fix was in from the beginning.
Right.
Because of my religion, the color of my skin, the shirt that I wore, this and that and the other. And they will have you believe that, Brian, there is the only case that matters, and everybody else throughout history planned to screw them so that when their case came up, do you get what I'm trying to say? Everything was aligned against them. Come on.
Yeah.
Is that likely? That's my thing. I deal in likelihood. Is it more likely that the law is there to protect you and even the playing field, or is it more likely that the law is there to keep this secret triumvirate, Brian, in power? That controls Wall Street. Shut up.
Yeah. And anyone who's been around anyone in any position of power should just immediately come to the realization is like, wow, these are just a bunch of assholes trying to figure shit out too, huh?
They are, and they're wearing 16-ounce gloves in the dark. But we believe in the stonecutters.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. So you brought up a couple things. One, you said, we fear what we don't understand, and we talk about that all the time. And I think much that is such a deep psychological and sociological imperative, right?
Yep.
Meaning it's so hardwired in us to fear and be wary of things that we don't fully understand, because that's a survival mechanism. That's why if we weren't that way, there would be no more human race, right? Everyone going, wow, that snake looks friendly. Let's go pet it. And they would have died, right? So the idea.
Or I don't believe that you tell me that cobra's venom is dangerous, so I'm going to go prove it for myself. You're exactly right.
But this comes back to the kind of like the ultimate question, and I guess the ultimate, but my my ultimate goal in life or path, which there really is no, it's not an achievable or attainable one, but you can get close, is how do we get the most pure vanilla? Meaning, how do that? And this is a discussion. This isn't a specific answer, but the whole point of this is we're talking about establishing a baseline or figuring out what's going on. I have to start somewhere, and where I start is the most important place, because I need the purest signal there. Because if I focus solely on what that pure signal is, that pure vanilla, like the Ben and Jerry's, I want to make the greatest tasting vanilla ever, because whatever I add on top of that is just going to complement it. It's going to go well, and it's going to be there. So if I have this base, so that's the whole concept of what we talk about, is how do I figure out that? Because then any anomalies, anything that stands outside of that will be so glaringly obvious because I have this pure signal. But we often start with anomalies. We start with, well, that's weird. Why is that weird? Well, I think it's because of this. It's like, whoa, hang on. How do we get back to painting that picture? How do we get that clear tabula rasa? What do I have to clear off of that in order to then start the painting?
So I would say this. I would say first, grab your yellow pad, turn it on a rectangle, draw a line through the center that's sort of like a left to right, like we would do for left to bang, right to bang, and at bang. Okay, so now you have a continuum, let's call it. I would also say that to the right side of that, put a little check box and put "you are here." So Brian, what you're asking us to challenge in our assumptions today is to put our finger along that line and move to the left from that "you are here" point and say, we agree with blank information all the way up to this point, but at this point things become suspect, so I'm going to do that math problem until I get it right. I'm going to try to see the evidence for myself. That's great, because that's a scientific method. So let's give you just two examples, one a local, one here. Black Canyon of the Gunnison. And folks, if you ever want to come to the most beautiful place on earth, come to Colorado, come to the Western Slope, come to Gunnison and play around. Everything in an hour in a circle that you draw around here is the most amazing thing you've ever seen. So Black Canyon of the Gunnison, huge, deep, beautiful canyon filled with wildlife and fish and everything else, started as a drop of water, Brian. The drop of water turned into a stream. The stream cut for millions of years until it created this beautiful anomaly. It's an anomaly nonetheless. It's rare in the world, but it has precedent. Royal Gorge, Black Canyon of the Gunnison, gosh damn, what's the one that people go to all the time in Arizona, the Grand Canyon, okay, things like that, right? So now that we have those, we have sort of a base as we're going left. But now, take a look with the Black Canyon of the Gunnison exposed, Brian. And what you'll see is these striations, and each one of those, like the rings on a tree, are years or decades or hundreds of years or thousands of years. Now, as you go through that, Brian, it looks like layers of paper. They're all even. Every single one of them is uniform. Until what? Until you get to something that's anomalous. And now, Brian, if you separate those sheets of paper and peer inside like a geologist, now you see there was a huge storm or an asteroid hit the Earth or comets or fire or something. So, Brian, I'm saying that for every inch that you go left on this continuum, you have to understand that there's anomalies that come above and below normal. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Right.
And so you're telling me, and I'm paraphrasing Brian, folks, you're telling me to question those assumptions where the anomalous behavior is so outlandish or so outside what would be expected, okay? And that's where your starting point is. I completely agree. Some people have done the work for us. So we go back to that point and we take a look at it. Here's where I get weird. Statistics. You can buy statistics or manipulate them to show whatever else you want.
Yes.
But when it's something like your point, and I didn't see it on LinkedIn, but when you talk about the person saying most language is nonverbal, well, first of all, the simplest argument for that person is that babies can't talk. So babies must be using something else.
They must be dying left and right.
You get what I'm trying to say?
Because they can't tell their mom they're hungry.
Okay, so there's and there's probably a couple babies born every year, Brian.
Yeah,
so I would assume you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to talk to me about those statistics, I will what? I will stipulate to that. But if you're putting your finger on the scale, or if you're manipulating data in any way, I cast thee out. And I say, go to tabula rasa and start over. So anytime that we've got a situation where it's a political appointee to a judge's position, I get skeptical. Why? Because, Brian, are you telling me that you're not paying back? You gave me the ambassadorship to Turkey, and I'm not going to pay you back. So that's where I call bullshit.
And you don't see that. That's a great example, the appointment of judges, because it's part of our legal system and how it works, right? And so what's great is, like, you see these obviously like Supreme Court decisions that fall along ideological lines, right? But not on all of them. What I love is when you see a Supreme Court decision where it's unanimous. Why? Because they can go, okay, well, in here, this is so glaringly obvious that no matter where you're sitting, this violates the Constitution, or this upholds whatever law, whichever way it is. Those are great. But then when it gets to that little bit of cognitive dissonance comes in there, Greg, and we start doing, well, wait, this is challenging. This is really challenging what my beliefs are of this court system. And then the other justice or judge is going, well, this is challenging. And you have two different opinions on the same case. Well, that's everything in a nutshell. I mean, that's human life.
It is.
That's emotion and how we process information. And there's no such thing as being purely logical. Even a mathematician is illogical. But the idea is that's where the kind of, that's where, well, I call it, that's where the beauty lies in the human condition.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's where we get everything from. That's where art comes from. That's where
we're not saying being a robot, being an automaton, Brian. But we're not saying that everybody in the world has to be vanilla. We're saying that when we come to a discussion point, when we come to a debate, when we come to making a decision on buying a used car, or who I might date or who I might not, if we go back to tabula rasa and we yellow pad it, we're likely to come up with the right decision. Now, what I mean by that is we've got to weigh things equally. For example, if we start taking a look and saying, I'm rich, you're poor. Okay, now we're in Hollywood and we're trying to make a movie script. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Because what are they going to say? Do you remember the hooker with the heart of gold?
Oh, yeah,
I was a cop for 30 years. I never saw the hooker with the heart of gold. I saw the hooker with the scabies and the crabs, and she was cross-addicted and codependent. So my thing is, let's deal in fact-based data. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And not muddy the water with ridiculous other shit. So when people come in and they say, my brother, sister, uncle couldn't have done this, or when they say that's not fair to this specific group of people, look, the law and the rules were drafted to be equal to everybody. And therefore, your obligation is to be that everybody when you come in with an open mind and a new set of rules when you're listening.
So it's like the same thing when we talk about body language. One of the things that I always tell people is, start becoming more aware of your own, and you'll get really good at reading others. And I think this is a great example of what we talk about. So, that cognitive dissonance, Greg, if I have a message or I have something I want to send, I want to send the purest signal possible, because I don't want that muddied. I don't want you to take it the wrong way. It's why I don't post a lot on social media, because I'm a more cautious or careful, because I don't want it to fall off the rails. I want I want it to be clear. I want my intent to be clear and what I'm saying to be clear. So I always tell people is to reduce or attempt to reduce sort of that cognitive dissonance is you have to do it for yourself first, right? Meaning, how do I make sure that what I'm going to do and say is heard in the manner and understood in the manner for which I say it? Now, there's always going to be someone in the room that's like, well, you meant that. Fuck that person and don't pay attention. We got to stop paying attention to those people, and we got to just kick them out of society.
But there's your social media. There's your
everyone
your
gets a
signal to noise ratio.
The problem with when everyone gets a say is that
nobody gets a say.
Well, this goes into the next thing of what barriers to entry are not a bad thing. They can be a really good thing.
Absolutely agree.
If those barriers are constructed with the right intent and for the right reason. So, disqualifying you to get into this program makes this program better, because we have criteria that must be met, and you didn't meet that criteria, so you're going to slow everyone down.
As long as that criteria is what, Brian?
Based on merits,
logical and reasonable and scientific merit, weight, to body fat, because there's certain things. Look, if you can't lift 60 pounds, then you can't be in the club.
No,
do you see what I'm trying to say?
There's certain ones, and what happens is now those can be used. So a perfect example are military units. Like my general opinion is any military unit, anyone, I don't care what it is, what their job is, that has some sort of selection process, whatever that's like a physical thing over days or weeks, or that's I'm just going to review your past and decide. Anyone with the selection process is likely going to be a higher functioning unit with better people in it, and that's just across the board. And so the problem with creating barriers to entry is they can be used incorrectly. They can be used to keep people out that you don't want based on some ideological perspective, not based on what their performance is. I always see that when someone goes like, "Oh, they're not a real Marine," I go, "Did they fucking pass boot camp? They're a fucking Marine. Shut up." Like they met the standard. Did they meet or exceed the standard? Then sorry, if you don't like that, go change the standard, right? Or they're not a real, whatever. They're not
because
a real
now you created a new standard that they fall short of. That's not allowed.
That's bullshit. You know what I mean? They're not a real American. Like, what the fuck does that mean, you asshole? Like, what the hell? So the idea is that can get used incorrectly, but those are necessary for a reason, right? They're necessary to we need categories for people, right? We need to fit into certain elements so that
you're treading on thin ice here.
Well, they're necessary.
No, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying you're absolutely right. But you know why you're treading on thin ice? Because you're going to hurt some people's sensibility that approach this emotion-based rather than logic-based.
Yeah, no, and that's true. Which everything is.
Warning.
You have everything is to a certain point, some more than others, based with emotion as well. But we have to understand where we fit in, and that's difficult sometimes. I've had the door slammed in my face before. It's like, dude, you don't rate to be here. You got to get out of the room. Okay, it's kind of a shitty feeling where you're like, geez, I thought I was
horrible feeling.
No, man, like you're not there yet. Sorry, that sucks. But then you go, yeah, you know what, you're right. I really wasn't there. Or you know what, yeah, you made the rules, so I don't get to come in. I think if it's the point of some of this is when we get into different types of expression and criticism and opinions. We all get to do it. We all get to have it. That doesn't mean it's worth a shit. And you see this so many times. It's like anything. I would listen to Elon Musk's thoughts on space exploration and electric vehicle manufacturing. Well, why? Because that's what he's been doing for a really long time. I don't give a shit about what his opinion on what he thinks free speech is, because it's not really. Right. I would rather talk to
you're talking confirmation bias.
Well, I would rather talk to someone who studies and teaches constitutional law than him. But we don't do that. We have those fundamental attribution errors. Cognitive dissonance. I like what he says, so therefore he must be good. This is where it gets into it. And
hold on, let me throw one at you, Brian. So to be suspect, folks, don't gloss over what Brian just said. He said he goes to Elon Musk for Elon Musk's strong suit. He doesn't go to Elon Musk and go, what brand of shoe do you wear? Because that has a bearing on your decision-making process.
Exactly.
Second thing is be suspect immediately if anybody throws the Dunning-Kruger effect at you. The idea is two things. One, they're overusing it or misapplying it. And two, they don't
That's the pop psychology one now. There's going to be a new one in 6 months.
But it'll change in 6 months. The idea, and look, we're not trying to insult you. We're trying to insult your intellect. The idea is you have to take a minute.
You just came out and explicitly stated it.
Just saying it. What you have to do is you have to back up for a minute and you have to go back. That's one of the experiments you have to do. Brian, for example, what you were talking about, how many times have we seen the Fed in any manifestation go back to a burglar or a serial killer or a master lockpicker and say, hey, we need to know how it's done? Brian, first of all, that's rare as hen's teeth because it almost never pays dividends. I'll tell you one caper out of all the times that I've been studying, folks, and I'm nothing. I'm nobody, but I got a 50-year advantage on many people on research. One thing was the guy, and I don't even remember his name, that was played by Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah, that's
in the film that did all the passport forgeries and all that other stuff.
That's a perfect example because that guy was so full of shit.
Yes. And he got caught over and over and over and over again. Do you understand what I'm saying? But you take a look at, like, when they talked to Green River and they said, hey, can you tell us how you chose the victims and everything? Brian, when it comes to pathology and when it comes to psychopathy, there's groups of things. And once you identified that this is precursor. It's like any other thing in the world. Then you like heart disease, Brian. There's different forms of heart disease. First of all, that most people don't understand that it's not all just one. So like congestive heart failure is different from some other issues. So they all meet categories. So when you come in and you go, oh, Dunning-Kruger, like Dunning-Kruger means you don't know the fuck you're talking about. So you're confused by somebody else's point. What I'm trying to say is do even the most basic points of research, and then you can come into the room and sit down and have a logical discussion. If you bring your emotion, this doesn't feel right. This is wrong because it disenfranchises me, and I'm different than everybody else in the room. Then you know what, Brian, you got to take a step back. That's my thing. I just get when I feel like you said it about the mic. Go a little deeper with that mic thing. We teach a lot, and we run into snipers once in a while.
Yeah.
And the sniper doesn't like the fact that we're teaching the course. And it's like, okay, so you disagreeing with my science? And it's like, well, no. Okay, so you disagreeing with that I'm younger than you and I've got further in life than you? Yes. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Right.
So kiss my ass. And I can prove that. What's the number one question that we get comment-wise? We always get, well, I want to be you. How do I get to be you? Because it looks like you got the world solved. Well, you know what? We don't have the world solved.
No.
We got a laser focus on 3 questions that we can answer with a great deal of knowledge. Out of the 8 billion questions that linger out there in the world, we know 3 of them. You know?
No, and there's a difference between what we're talking about on here and what we do in class or what we teach.
Yep,
because
totally different.
Class and teach it's very, 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 very laser focused and specific, minute after minute, day after day, and we don't step outside of that without saying something to that effect of, okay, you're getting into an area, we can have that discussion after class, maybe if we have time, but we teach it from this way, and this is why I don't want to.
Because we're experts in this only.
Well, yeah, and it's like, hey, you're getting to the limit of something, and we're gonna stay over here. We'll talk later, which is different than what we do in the podcast, because right now, obviously, we just get on and go. Hey, you ready?
Yeah, okay. But see, that's what people expect from us on a podcast. You know, Brian, listen, when we talk topical. When we laser focus, we warn people that we're going to deep dive. You know, I'll give you a perfect example of that. There was a horrific school shooting overnight. We're not ready to talk about that.
Yeah, I don't want to get into it.
Okay.
I knew you were going to fucking bring it up, and I didn't even want. I don't even want to go there.
But we have to.
Yeah.
We have to, because the idea is that we don't know enough to render an opinion. So anybody right now that's rendering opinion on that doesn't, I mean, even if you were catastrophically at the scene and avoided death or injury or something and saw a part of it, you don't know enough to start commenting about it. Brian, it takes time. And the gift of time and distance allows us to change our opinion when science comes in and demonstrates that the artifacts and evidence weigh more here, meaning they're weighted more, not by sheer weight, but by their, you know, hey, this person was an expert that was at the scene that calculated these things. We stipulate to it. So let's not go into knee-jerk reactions and gut feelings on things. Let's take an extra day or week, right, and educate ourselves, and then say, okay, we know this. We'll be willing to speak on those topics. So when somebody comes up and goes, yeah, but what do you really think? Okay, I just told you what I fucking really think. I think we need to wait it out. So the topics that we're talking about are sometimes people coming to the table and throwing their belly up against the bar, Brian, and chipping in their 2 cents when they weren't wanted, when they weren't warranted, and when their 2 cents don't value as much as your 2 cents. It's like a Colombian peso to a US dollar.
Yeah, and there's all of these different factors that we've discussed that kind of go into corrupting the way we look at the situation. And, you know, it goes back to kind of what we first started talking about is that there are societal norms that maybe aren't rules, but they're somewhat expected. And the problem with that is that can be a gray area. And so if we're in here, there's a couple examples that came to mind. One was there's a guy, I forget his name. He's trying to start a union for Amazon employees. And I read something that he wrote, and I listened to him interviewed one time, and I'm like, man, this guy's good, man. Like, you know, I'm just like, holy cow. Like he's very, what he wanted to do and the points he were trying to make were very well articulated to even someone like me who knew nothing about the work conditions at Amazon, very little about labor laws or anything. Went, okay, this guy's making a compelling argument. And then I think he got called to testify, and then he went to testify in Congress or DC somewhere. I don't remember what the specific, if it was a committee or wherever. And he didn't put on like a suit and tie. Like he was just wearing like a ball cap and t-shirt. And people kind of got in this discussion, which I think rightly so. It's like, hey, and people were like, hey, my man, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, you got to look the part. You got to do this because that's what's normal for there. Someone's going to throw you into this stereotype that you don't belong in, and simply by the way you're dressed. And it's powerful because it's important.
Powerful.
Because we all do that. I mean, that goes back to even it's like you can go back when Nixon and Kennedy were debating, and everyone who listened to the debate over the radio said, wow, Nixon mopped the floor with Kennedy. Anyone who watched it, everyone went, that's Kennedy guy.
Kennedy
crushed
it
because he was comfortable and he looked good and he was eloquent, and like, Nixon's pouring sweat and just, having a hard time because he's so in the moment. But like, those two perspectives are huge. And I think those are important to have if you're going to throw out any type of societal or social norm in those situations. Then you are opening yourself to that criticism. You are muddying the waters of your message. And so it's your responsibility. And does that take a little bit of extra time and effort? Yeah, it does. It's called attention to detail. Like,
so let me throw something in to counterpoint what you just said. And it'll be based on my personal worldview. So the two crimes that I think are the most reprehensible, worst crimes in the world are burglary and contempt of court. After burglary would be rape. And the reason is, for the burglary, is your house is your castle. It's your home. It's your protected area. And nobody should come in without you allowing them to do that. And the same thing with your womb or your, if you're a male or female that's been raped, I get it. But burglary. Now, why contempt of court? Because the court is a special thing. When you come before the court, the reason there's a bar between you and the judge, the reason that there's a table between the attorneys and the bar before the jury, is because we must respect the judge, the law, the jury, and the process. And so if our intent is to disrupt that in any manner, it should be quashed. It should be destroyed. And so it's the same thing with, if there's anything that says that you can come into my house without a warrant or Brian, it should be quashed as well. Now, people say, yeah, but they stopped your car. Car's a different thing, man. Car's a mobile thing. You get what
courts have ruled on
trying
that,
to say? Don't even start with me. Okay. So the same thing. If you're sitting at your park bench at the park eating barbecue with your family, you don't enjoy the same rights. So don't get me hooked on that. But I think what we're saying is those areas are things that we've stipulated to that are different than other areas. So I don't care where you live. And I think that if you live in a box under a freeway, that's your house, and you've got certain protections.
It's been ruled. It's been ruled that in New York City there was a case where someone was living on the street in their box, and then I can't remember what happened, but that was violated. They considered it that person's domicile, their home, for less.
But they had to establish it too, Brian.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm trying to say? It wasn't just a thing that, hey, listen, the cops are chasing me, so I see a Maytag washer box, I'm going to jump into that. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, exactly.
But the idea there, Brian, is the same. The idea is that listen, kids play better ball when you buy them uniforms. Martial artists perform better even at white belts when you buy them a gi. Because there's an identity, and whether that's a physiological or a sociological identity, it comes with that. So the idea of being civil and idea of not speaking over, it's different again on a pod. We're opinionated. We know we only got an hour. We're both apex predators, so we're constantly, vying for that. We don't do it because of ego. The ego never enters into our discussions, and that's a really good thing, because what do, Brian? We even have rules for conduct, right? And that allows us to get to the central point of the fucking argument.
And whether they're explicit or implicit, I mean, there's certain, there are, rules to debate, not just debate, but actual conversation, right? You have to be willing. If we're going to have an honest conversation, you have to accept the fact that I may say something that will offend you, or that I'm wrong about, or that I'm just curious and it may be inappropriate, but otherwise we can't have an honest conversation. But this kind of
well, we can't make progress on that conversation. That
right.
too is the second point.
That's a good
letting
point.
that foot drop, because we can't go forward in society. We can't get past these rough patches unless we agree to stipulate to certain things that, look, mistakes were made. If I stipulate to that, hey, look, in civil rights, mistakes were made. Okay, and I mean that for all civil rights. Okay, so in religious persecution, mistakes were made. When we were in World War II, we treated Japanese Americans poorly.
Yeah.
Brian, let's
Yeah.
stipulate to that,
Yes.
because without stipulating to that and moving forward, we're never going to make progress. If we continue to go back every time, like this is a dichotomous relationship. People go back and they go, the argument you're using is from 1858. Unless that argument helps you, and then you start quoting shit from
right.
1709. So you
Of
see what I'm
course.
trying to say?
Of course.
If we're going to be truly equal, if we're going to have equality when it comes to these legal, at least rule discussions, then we have to have some.
Well, there's
the
some
Marquis de Queensberry rules. How you box, how you drive. There's rules and everything we do.
Well, and especially that, and there's historical, foundations, and a lot of what we do that we just forget, or people don't know where that came from, and it's like we want to throw it out. But you did mention, how ego getting in the way, and we talk about that in the sense of all humans, we have your description is always it's a fragile ecosystem, right? And we all do, some more than others, but every single person does in some way. And that's a big one. It reminds me of the talk about everything that we talked about in this episode. It reminds me of do you remember being out at the infantry immersive trainer at Camp Pendleton when DARPA, Dr. Tony Tether, the then head of DARPA, came out?
Big smart guy. He's still with DARPA.
Is he?
Oh, yeah. But he's just in a different division now. I saw his name the other day looking through some stuff, and it's amazing. But please,
so
he
was, I think, he was the head of the, if anyone listening,
at the time he was
the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is, you just look them up. They've done every cool thing that the United States or the military or anything has invented. Started with a project at them. They fund research and they build stuff, everything from satellites to GPS stuff. That was all DARPA. That was all stuff. The internet was basically created by them originally. But the idea is, so you've got this guy comes out to Camp Pendleton, and he's fat scientist guy, brilliant guy, you know what I mean? And he puts on the Marine Desert Digi camouflage uniform, and there were a lot of Marines getting all butthurt and pissed off, going, he doesn't rate to wear those. What is he? He looks like a slob. He's not a Marine. You can't wear that. And they just completely missed the point of what he was doing. What he was literally trying to do was take that perspective. Okay, if I'm going to be a Marine and I'm going to go through this thing and I'm going to look at it through the lenses of DARPA and what we're trying to do, how do I do that? He didn't say this out loud, but that's what he did. He said, all right, I'm going to put that on and I'm going to go through and I want to feel these senses and I want to see what that Marine sees. It was literally him trying to get as much perspective as he possibly could, because those little things, like he's going to find out, well, this uniform gets really annoying after a while, or it chafes here. Now I understand why this affects me. Like, that's all part of taking that perspective. And it was, the point was very much missed by a lot of people, but I thought it was a brilliant thing, because something so simple and almost goofy looking because of how he was.
So let me depose you. First of all, he's lost a lot of weight. Brilliant guy. Totally agree with you. And at first, it was a stark reminder of how geniuses think.
Oh, yeah, he's brilliant.
But do me a comparison. So why would you protect Dr. Tony Tether, a genius, and his decision? And why would you vilify somebody that did wearing the false Purple Heart? I can't
stolen
remember.
valor.
What is it? Stolen valor. That's the term that I was searching for. What was the difference there, Brian? How do you see that
intent
as being different?
Well, the intent was different. Yeah,
that's the key. So the key is that if your intention is to come and disrupt the way we think by carrying a sign, naming your band like the Anti-Putin Pussy Riot, my favorite band. Go for it.
You've been fans of them for years.
I have been, and you know that. And so every time they poke Putin in the eye, I absolutely go crazy over them, because and they were willing to do the jail time. They were evocative and provocative. Why? Because they wanted to make a difference. And so I give them all the leeway in the world.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm sitting on a bus next to a person that's got the purple mohawk and the chain face, and I look and I smile. I go, hey, can I have my picture taken with you? Why? Because I need to talk about this in class. Why, man? I'm just showing how different I am. I go different from that guy, and that guy. They're all on the same bus. Brian, sometimes people want to be, they want to create cognitive confusion because that's the only way that they can get your attention. But that doesn't mean they have a perspective that's more valid than somebody else. I'm telling you, I would look at Tether's choice and go, I get it.
What was
Do you
his
see
intent?
what I'm trying to say?
No,
and I love that you chose intent as the difference.
Because, and that's what I always tell people on here too about the social media stuff is because there's so much communication out there, you almost feel compelled to say something about everything that's fucking going on, and you don't have to, right? But everyone's saying, well, I just want to say that, people have been asking me. It's like people kept asking us about the Buffalo shooter. I said I don't want to talk about it, and then I ended up on the last episode because I was angry that it kept coming out. But the idea is, is what is your intent? And I think that gets lost because I don't think people because we're just mimicking each other and getting involved in these things that everyone else is doing. So we're commenting on social media, we're sharing this and doing that. We don't even realize how far off we've gotten with some of the things that we're doing. We don't even know why we're on transmit anymore. Like I have people that have comment some stupid comment on a social media post making up like, hey, what was your intent with this comment? And they can't fucking answer. Why? Because it was just shouting out in the void. And every once in a while you get someone who's honest. I had one guy who was like, look, man, normally I love your content. I'm just a troll. He's like, I'm just bored at home. It's the middle of the night. And you know what? I'm sorry. And I was like, oh, okay, I can deal with you. Brian, like you.
How many people have built their platform on a platitude of somebody else's work or word? Stop that for a minute. Okay, listen, every once in a while I evoke or invoke something that I like that somebody else said. It's rare as hen's teeth, okay? And it's probably something really, really old that you're misattributing to the person that you think said it. So for example, the Australian general, Brian, the standard that you walk by is the standard that you accept. I'll never forget that. I'll use that all the time because that's amazing. But I didn't build my life and my career on somebody else's words, and I didn't try to say, well, that is close enough for me that I'm going to plug it in. The guy that came up to us, the special forces guy with the vintage Jesus that was chasing me down the street, waving that book at me because I said Allah and Vishnu and Islam and many of the Abrahamic religions are virtually identical when you pull back some of the things and how they dress. And he lost his shit. He lost his shit because there was cognitive dissonance right where we started. It challenged his assumptions, and he was unwilling, Brian, to accept that things might happen. We have a good friend that's unwilling to accept certain things because they have a strong set of opinions and values. Let's not let that get in between our friendship. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That doesn't mean I raise my kids differently. Doesn't mean it's wrong. I dress differently. Doesn't mean it's wrong. You see what I'm trying to say? But that's not where we're coming from. We're coming from is if your intent is disruptive. Okay. Then you're on the wrong track.
I think there's a lot of people that never even put any thought into what their intent was. They're just simply going through their life reacting to everything, and everything's an outrage or a moral outrage or a fire.
And we've got 8 billion chances of it every time somebody writes something on social media.
I think not a lot of thought has been put into it. The problem is that it has an actual effect. It has a net effect after a while.
But not the Dunning-Kruger effect that you want to invoke at every instance. No, but think about that. That is true, right? Listen, words matter.
Words matter.
So you go on social media and you're 1/8 billionth of the world and you wrote 2 sentences, but what you don't understand is you just crushed somebody to their soul intentionally or unintentionally. And if your intent was that you did it because it made you feel better, then you're a shit human, and you got to rein it in. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So I just have a real hard time. That's why I don't do social media, Brian, because I've got enough things. Look at the size of my fucking head. Do you get what I'm trying to say? I'm an overlarge person. I have no fashion sense, all that other stuff. So people could tear me up. But you want something? Come get some. Come sit with me at a table and discuss an issue. Do you see what I'm saying, Brian? And why do I say that? Because I want to equalize it. That's why some people like to listen to a podcast and some people like to still see us.
It's a good point. Kind of
not fun to think of all the time.
we talked about a lot. It's always hard wrapping up some of the stuff because we jumped around between the perception and orientation and stereotypes and individual expression and cognitive dissonance and barriers to entry and a whole bunch of
and we got 400 more episodes just on those topics.
Yeah,
exactly.
It is, and I just think it's one of those. I try to be as open or accepting or lenient about what people say as possible. Now that changes when it comes to what people do, right? That's a clear line. Like if I were to compare myself to the average person, whatever that means, I feel like I'm very much open to more ideas, thoughts, or what your words are. Like I'm not easily offended, but if I were to compare myself to that average person about someone's behavior, what they do, I guarantee I'm very less forgiving on that because there's.
I could testify to that. I travel with you.
Well, right. Like you could say whatever you want, but when it comes down to what you're going to do, it's clear guidelines of what's acceptable and what isn't, and I'm not going to tolerate that. And I think that's a good distinction too with how much lives are done virtually over social media. I guess I don't know. Sometimes I think if just those sites like went down for a week, I think we'd have like everyone would realize that they're probably a lot better off than they were.
Not missing anything.
Yeah, I don't know though, but yeah, that any other kind of final thoughts? We did cover a lot, and I think we'll probably jump into a few more of these things on the Patreon side. And folks,
I agree.
We have some video breakdown stuff we do on our Patreon site. We have other kind of stuff that we don't talk about on here. That's more examples kind of on that side. You can always check the link.
Because we want you to pay something.
It helps us,
so we don't have for free.
So we don't have to get any sponsors.
What's our intent?
And we don't have to stop every 5 minutes to go. Brought to you by Ovaltine or whatever Greg would get us sponsored by. It would be something Similac.
It would be something that has to do with my butt cream. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So right now it's Metamucil. Can you imagine that? Oh, I swear to God, I can show you the bottle of Metamucil, and it's a powdered form.
Yeah.
And it's like hideous, and they say, you can't take it. If you want to know what it's like taking Metamucil, take a bite of beach sand and try to wash it down with room temperature water. So, but I need it, Brian.
Sounds amazing. Sounds amazing.
I've got that to look forward to when I get off this call.
Perfect. None of that Ben and Jerry's waiting in the freezer for you. Any final things, Greg, you want to wrap with? I'll throw to you.
No. I tell you what, we started with cognitive dissonance. We started with perspective, and I would tell everybody the gift of time and distance doesn't just mean distance from a mine or a bomb or a sniper. The gift of time and distance means that my opinion might be better 45 minutes from now or tomorrow. So that knee-jerk reaction that I do when I hit Instagram or Yoohoo or whatever that shit is, maybe I should rein that in once in a while because, you have the absolute right to say it under the First Amendment, but now it's going to be recorded and played back at your trial.
And just because you have a right to do something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Great point.
So thanks everyone for tuning in. Please reach out to us with any questions, leftofgreg@gmail.com, or any other ideas for episodes or topics you want us to cover. Please send us that stuff. I respond to everyone. If we get real busy, it might take me a few days, but I eventually get back to everyone. So thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you appreciate the show. And if you did, please share it with your friends. And don't forget that training changes behavior.